Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Molly, and for this episode, we're joined by Peter Greensmith. We're sitting down with Peter to get to know a bit more about his leadership journey and his relationship with Academy Wales. Thank you so much for joining us. So to begin, do you recall when and how you first heard of Academy Wales?
I do, and it's a bit of a strange route, actually. So I remember in the past reading things about Academy Wales and looking at things that sounded interested, but in one of those 30 seconds of free time that you have, and then it kind of drifts away from your head at that point in time. And then a couple of months later, I actually met up with a colleague from the education sector. We'd had a meeting and we were just chatting afterwards, and they were recounting to me their experience on the winter school. And so it jogged something at the back of my memory, and I thought I need to go away and look again, because I'm sure there was a lot of stuff that interested me on that website, and I need to actually do something about putting it into my career planning this time. And so I did.
And can you share with us which Academy Wales programme or programmes you've attended?
So I've attended the Senior Leadership Experience, which was amazing, way more than I thought I would get out of it. But I've also looked at the winter school, but I was too late applying for the winter school. I'm currently looking at the summer school because that obviously has a huge interest for me. But on top of that, I've also applied for the executive or the aspiring executive director programme. Didn't get in last time, but that hasn't put me off, and I will be applying again.
And what attracted you to the Senior Leadership Experience?
There were two things, really. So one of them was reflection. I tell this story quite a lot. I used to not see any value in reflection. I used to think it was that moment's gone, we need to look to the future, we need to stop thinking about the past. And then I had a wonderfully enlightened boss who used to be a nurse. Won't surprise you, reflection used to be a nurse. And she really taught me the value of reflection. And so since that point, I've reflected quite a lot, weekly, really. I do weekly posts on LinkedIn with my reflections on the previous week and what I'm planning to do differently. So that was one part of it. But the other part of it was really to sit down and take a look at myself. I think it's very rare when you're on a career journey, particularly, that you actually take the time to stop and look at yourself. You know, we're all very much about where we're going, where we're heading, what we need to do to get to that point. And I think sometimes we can do that at the exclusion of where we are, what we need to do today to make us that person we need to be in the future. And I'd actually done a 360 appraisal as part of my appraisal not long before that point. And I was very interested actually by the feedback that other people had given. You know, it's always that disconnect between what you think about yourself and what others think about you. And it prompted more reflection around the whole, who am I and what do I do when I'm at work, and how do I come across when I'm at work? And so those things combined really made the Senior Leadership Experience stand out for me, mainly for the fact that it is quite centred on you as a person and your journey and kind of where you are. I'll pick up on that a little bit more on one of the questions that we'll come to soon. But I think it was that attraction of doing something, and you know, I'll be really honest, I'm very, very uncomfortable with that part of my practice. I'm very, very good at the reflection, very good at picking out the things I could have done better, but really quite awkward when it comes to talking about myself or actually looking at myself, my practice, and more importantly, how that impacts other people. And so that was the main draw for me, was the fact that it would make me uncomfortable. I think quite often we choose training or support that keeps us in our comfort zone. We learn and stretch from it, but it doesn't really push our core that much. And so I really wanted something that was going to help me evaluate myself.
Yeah, sounds like the Senior Leadership Experience was exactly that then. What is your standout in terms of leadership knowledge, skills, or like learning insight that you gained from that programme?
I'm going to do two, actually, because they're very closely linked. So one of them was the feedback. As part of the testing, we got the results back, and part of that result set was around the environment that you create for your team and those that work with you, and the environment that you yourself work in. Now, I'm not silly. So I knew that there was a big disconnect between those two things, in that I like to create a safe space for my colleagues that work alongside me. I like to create a space where we can try things and fail, and people can push their boundaries and try new things. So I knew that the environment that I create for those around me is a really safe environment, and it's somewhere where they can feel confident in developing themselves, expressing themselves, and really saying, that's completely not my wheelhouse, but I'd quite like to have a go. And then I compared that to the set of results that I got for the environment that I work in. And I talked through it as part of the programme, talked through it with my coach. I talked through it with colleagues, actually, because I thought it was quite important to bring them back into that conversation, because it was them that had prompted it, really. And it really opened out a part of challenging the way that I work, really. So in many ways, I'm quite modern. I just described the environment that I create around me, which is, quite a modern way of working. But at the same time, I'm quite traditional. So, I believe that it's my job to filter out a lot of the stuff that goes on around us that creates an air gap, I guess, for the team to get on and do what they're doing. And part of that feedback that came back really was around being more honest about not necessarily the struggles, because we all know the struggles, but the impacts and how it's affecting me, and how we can work together as a team better to eliminate some of that. So I still get to shield a lot of it, but we can talk about it a lot more. And actually it changed my practice a lot. So I'll have a lot more in-depth discussions now about the environment that we're working on and how it impacts our work. And I think I'll speak for them, because they're not here to do it themselves. But I think from my colleagues' perspective, it's really helped them understand a little bit more around the speed and the pace at which we're able to do some of the pieces of work that we're doing. And it's removed a lot of their frustration out of that as well. So I think that was one of them. And I think the second one was really around allowing myself the ability to do that as well. Yeah. So, I am my own worst enemy. I put a huge amount of pressure on myself to deliver and to drive change and to move things forward, as we all do. I don't think anybody listening to this wouldn't be the kind of person that constantly wants to make change and really improve. But it's really made me more aware of that, and I think that it's both a good thing and a bad thing, I think. So I'm more aware of it in terms of what I'm planning, how we work, how it impacts on us. But I'm also more aware of it now in terms of calling it out a little bit more with my seniors and my peers, but certainly calling it out a little bit more now, and, relating the work that we're doing and the timescales around it back to those challenges, and, fully accepting, that is the right thing that we need to do, but I'm going to challenge your timescale now, because the environment that we work in doesn't allow us to work at the pace that we would want to. So I think they do sound like two disparate elements, but I think the pair of them together has been really powerful for me. And if I'm really honest, not something that I saw coming. When I entered into it, as we all do, I guess, I had my expectations, and I kind of thought I knew what I was going to take away from the end of it. And I was really pleasantly surprised, actually, to be hit by something that I hadn't seen coming, and to have to really think about how I wanted to change myself and my practice to be able to put that into action.
How was the networking and collaborating with other participants?
It was brilliant, actually. I think one of the key factors of it for me was listening to people from different agencies, different parts of the system, all having different versions of the same issues. We quite often push ourselves into a corner where we firmly believe that although these problems exist everywhere, they're worse in our sector or our division or our directorate. And I think that was lovely and comforting in one way. But I think the value of it for me was the discussions that we had as a group around those issues and how they affected us, and actually that the proper definition of networking for me. So that sharing of experience, and I can't tell you how to solve that problem. However, these are things that I did, and this made it better. And I think the network that we had in our little group was brilliant. I think the input that comes from Academy Wales is equally as good, because I think it's not it's not directive, and the senior leadership experience doesn't take you to a defined outcome, which I think means that that learning experience and that networking element of that learning experience is even more powerful, because you're not trying to be, or somebody is not trying to steer you back to a defined outcome that you need to achieve by the end of that module. So I think that freedom and that ability to learn experientially from the Academy Wales team as much as from the people in your group really made it worthwhile for me, because obviously they were able to bring their own perspectives, but also a perspective from other people that they've seen come through the experience, and I think that is really powerful.
Have you recommended Academy Wales leadership programmes to other leaders in your organisation or sector?
Oh, 100%. I think people are getting bored of me now. Even last week, I was at an event last week with colleagues, and I think there was 3 people there that I recommended definitely the senior leadership experience to. I've spoken to a couple of people about the aspiring director and aspiring exec director course programme, and the summer school and winter school. I don't stop banging on about to people and saying, even if it's not your thing, just go away and read the write-ups and the overview, and you'll definitely take something from that, even if you don't feel like you want to attend. And I think that's some of the value for me, especially being so reflective. I love to read about some of the things that are occurring on them, especially some of the speakers at the summer and winter school, and then go away and just reflect on the subjects that they're actually talking about. So even I think there's value even without attending, that you're still having thought-provoking moments around how that could affect your practice, because I think, again, especially working within health, we are in our own bubble to some extent, and I think that becomes really hard then to bring other opinions into that, because we are surrounded by groups of people who all we all have recruitment shortages, we all have issues around retaining staff, we all have issues about progression and career, and all of that together just keeps you in that little bubble of being within the issue, as opposed to being able to have a fresh viewpoint. So I really value the Academy Wales newsletters as well, actually, for that very same reason, that it pops my bubble. Even if it's for a minute, it pops my bubble and gives me a different thought for a minute or so, which I think is great.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing all your insights and feedback. It's been great to hear, and I hope you enjoyed the experience.
Yes, thank you.
Mae'n podlediad sgyrsiau ar arweinyddiaeth ar gael trwy ein gwefan. Mae'r hawlfraint y podlediad yma yn cael ei gadw gan Llywodraeth Cymru. Our Conversations on Leadership podcast is available through our website. Copyright of this podcast is held by the Welsh Government.